Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most exciting parts of Jujutsu Infinite, the cursed techniques. With so many powerful and unique abilities to choose from, it's easy to get overwhelmed by the variety. The only problem, getting the right cursed techniques isn't as simple as it sounds. With limited roles and the need to unlock extra CT slots, the grind to get your dream abilities can be a challenge. But once you do, trust me, the fun really begins. What makes Jujutsu Infinite stand out is how you can mix and match curse techniques to create some insanely powerful builds. Whether you're stacking skills for devastating combos or finding the perfect synergy between techniques, the possibilities are endless. And when you find that perfect combination, oh, the chaos you can unleash on your enemies. So stick around as we break down the best curse techniques and how you can use them to create the most broken builds in the game. Let's get into it. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking cursed techniques in Jujutsu Infinite. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching! The cursed techniques in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Blazing Courage, Construction, Cloning, and Tool Manipulation. Alright, let's dive right into the C-tier cursed techniques in Jujutsu Infinite. These techniques are kind of like that friend who's good to have around, but just doesn't stand out in a crowd. They're not terrible, but they're definitely not the stars of the show either. Let's break them down. First up, we have Blazing Courage. It's pretty solid for the most part and definitely better than some of the common techniques you might come across. But let's be real, it doesn't have that wow factor. The combo potential? Almost non-existent. And while the skill list is fine, it doesn't really do much to get you excited. You're basically getting average damage and a lack of versatility. Not a bad choice if you're stuck, but don't expect to carry the team with this one. Next on the list is Construction. This one has a decent range, which can be nice for keeping enemies at a distance, and its single-target moves aren't the worst. However, the big issue here is that it just doesn't have any synergy with other C-tier techniques, making it feel a little isolated. There's not much reason to pick it over some of the rarer techniques that do more damage and bring better overall utility to the table. And then there's Cloning. If you're looking for a solid 1v1 moveset, you've found it. The mobility isn't terrible, but here's the kicker. It's got insanely low damage output. You're pretty much trading off anything flashy for zero AoE, leaving you with an underwhelming option that's borderline useless in more chaotic battles. It can hold its own in a one-on-one, but when it comes to those bigger fights, not so much. Finally, we have Tool Manipulation. Now, if you're all about flying around and having the best navigation tools in the game, this one's for you. But once you're off the ground, you're left with pretty much nothing else. It's kind of like that one gadget you use once and then forget about because it doesn't really help you in other situations. Flying's cool and all, but when it's the only thing this technique offers, it's hard to get too excited about it. So yeah, these C-tier techniques might help you out in a pinch, but they're definitely not something to build your entire strategy around. They have their uses, but if you're aiming for the top, you'll probably want to keep looking. The cursed techniques in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Hydrokinesis, Cryokinesis, Curse Speech, Straw Doll, and Boogie Woogie. Alright, so let's dive into some of the B-tier cursed techniques in Jujutsu Infinite. The ones that have a solid foundation but don't quite hit the top of the list. These techniques have their perks, but if you want to take your game to the next level, you might want to pick and choose carefully. Let's break them down. First up, we've got Hydrokinesis. Now, this technique is all about range and AoE. Like, seriously, it's got some impressive area control. You can hit multiple enemies at once, and the combos are solid, so it's definitely fun to use in the right situations. But, let's be real, the long cooldowns are a bit of a mood killer. Plus, when it comes to dealing with bosses or PvP, it kind of falls flat. Single target DPS? Not its strongest suit. It's more about crowd control than pure damage output. Then there's Cryokinesis. This one's a bit of a mixed bag. It's got fantastic single-target CC, which is amazing for locking down opponents. The AoE is decent, and you've got some solid mobility and a nice maximum technique to top it off. But if you're looking for high damage, this isn't the technique for you. The damage output can feel a little underwhelming, and honestly, most other CTs outrange it pretty easily. Still, it's got its place, especially for support roles. Now let's talk about Cursed Speech. If you love supporting your team, this one can definitely shine. The combos are solid and you can dish out some useful support, but it's got some serious drawbacks. Those long windups can leave you vulnerable, and the range, well, let's just say you're gonna need that megaphone to actually reach anyone. The cooldowns are also pretty long, which means you'll be left waiting to make your next move. It's not terrible, but it's definitely not the best when you're up against faster or ranged CTs. Next, we've got Straw Doll. Okay, this one can hit hard. The range with Nails plus Resonance is great, and when you land your combos, you'll see some solid DPS. But here's the kicker. Your CC moves are all melee, which is risky. If you can't get in close, you're pretty much stuck with no real way to control the battlefield. And while your DPS is decent, the lack of AoE really holds you back when things get chaotic. If you've got good aim, this one can be a beast. If not, well, you're in for a struggle. Finally, we have Boogie Woogie. This technique is all about extreme mobility and counterattacks, and let me tell you, if you can master it, it's a game changer. The synergy with other CTs is a huge bonus, making it really fun to play. But, and it's a big but, it doesn't really shine when it comes to damage. Without a solid offensive CT backing you up, Boogie Woogie just doesn't have the punch you might want in PvP. It has a high skill floor, so you'll need to put in the time to make it work. If you're up for the challenge though, it can be super rewarding. So that's the rundown of the B-tier cursed techniques. They all have their pros and cons, and while they might not be top tier, they're far from useless. If you've got the right playstyle or team composition, these techniques can definitely hold their own. The cursed techniques in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Gambler Fever, Soul Manipulation, Volcano, Judgeman, Ratio, and Blood Manipulation. Alright, let's dive into the world of cursed techniques in Jujutsu Infinite. I know, everyone's talking about the S-tier stuff, but today we're gonna shine the spotlight on some A-tier techniques. These ones aren't quite top tier, but trust me, they've got some serious potential if you know how to use them right. So grab your popcorn and let's talk about the real gems that can take you to the next level. First up, we've got Gambler Fever. Now, this one is all about the insane buffs through its domain expansion, which is honestly a game changer. You get huge all-around buffs, making it great for both offense and defense. Add in the fact that it has great range and AoE, and a ton of combo skills to boot, and you've got yourself a technique that's really fun to mess around with. But here's the catch. You'll need to be precise with your aim. A lot of players who are good at dodging or punishing your attacks can make it a bit tough. Plus, you rely on the rush to close gaps, so be careful, alright? Next, let's talk about Soul Manipulation. If you're a fan of mobility, then you're gonna love this one. It's got solid 1v1 potential and the ability to make you untouchable with damage immunity. Always a huge plus in those tight fights. It also comes with some solid crowd control, so you can keep your enemies at bay. The catch? Well, the AoE isn't as impressive as some other techniques, so you might struggle against larger groups. Plus, like Gambler Fever, your aim has to be on point, and good players can easily punish mistakes. Volcano is another one that can really pack a punch if used correctly. The range and AoE are phenomenal, and let's not forget that insane damage. Seriously, when you pop your domain expansion with this technique, you're doing constant DPS, which can melt down enemies like butter. But just like any great power, there's a bit of a trade-off. You're looking at long cooldowns here, so you'll need to be careful about wasting your best moves. Also, single target DPS isn't its strong suit, so it's not the best if you're trying to focus on one enemy. Moving on, Judgment is one technique that's all about that 1v1 action. It's got insane single target damage and combos that can easily turn the tide of a battle. Add in the fantastic support from its cursed technique, and you've got a powerhouse that shines in those close quarters fights. But here's the downside. It's gotta rely on other cursed techniques for AoE damage since it's not great in that department. Plus, with its long cooldowns and RNG elements, you've gotta play smart if you want to get the most out of this one. Let's not forget about Ratio, which is all about making the most out of your single target DPS. It's got fantastic combos and can really shine in PvP situations if you know how to play your cards right. But here's the issue. Its AoE and range are practically non-existent, so you're gonna need extra utility from your other cursed techniques to balance it out. Still, for that rare CT, it's a solid choice that's really effective when used in the right situations. Lastly, we've got Blood Manipulation, and let me tell you, this one's a bit of a mixed bag. The ranged moves are really solid, allowing you to poke enemies from afar and keep them guessing. But the technique has its quirks. You'll need great aim, which is a bit of a challenge, especially with its long cooldowns. On top of that, it doesn't really synergize well with other cursed techniques because of the blood orb stacking mechanic. So, if you're going into this one, make sure you know how to play it solo. And that wraps up our A-tier techniques. Each of these has the potential to be a game changer in Jujutsu Infinite, but it all depends on how well you can handle the trade-offs. Keep practicing and you'll be dominating in no time. The curse techniques in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Infinity, Star Rage, Demon Vessel, and Queen Curse. Alright, buckle up because we're diving into the world of S-tier curse techniques in Jujutsu Infinite. These bad boys aren't just good, they're in a league of their own, and if you're lucky enough to unlock them, you're gonna be dominating the battlefield. So, let's break it down, starting with Infinity. This curse technique gives you insane range, a ton of AoE and CC on almost every move. It's like a buffet of control, and when you're using it, you can dish out some serious damage. And did I mention short-term invulnerability? Yup, you can escape a tight spot or just flex on your enemies. But here's the kicker. It's got some long cooldowns, and if you're not on point with your aim, you might miss your mark. Still, if you get it right, you're basically an unstoppable force. Next up, we have Star Rage. This one is a bit of a wild card. Solid AoE, amazing short-range skills, and guard breaks for days. It's got combos for days too, making you a constant threat. And then there's the maximum technique, which, let's be real, is just overpowered. However, there's a trade-off. Your mass meter relies on using Star Rage skills to deal damage, so it's a bit of a balancing act. Oh, and that domain expansion? Yeah, it's kinda underwhelming compared to the rest of its kit, but if you play your cards right, you can still make it work. Now, let's talk about Demon Vessel. This one's a combo fiend, with fantastic short-range AoE skills, guard breaks on every move, and an OP domain expansion that can clear the field. It's got short cooldowns, making it a smooth operator in battle. But here's where it gets tricky. Its cleave and flame arrow are super easy to dodge, and it relies heavily on rush for gap closing. So if you don't keep your speed up, you might find yourself out of range when you need to strike. Plus, the attack windups can feel pretty long, so timing is everything. Finally, let's talk about Queen Curse. This cursed technique steals techniques, and that alone is pretty wild. But it also gives you great range and AoE, plus easy combo skills and short attack windups. That domain expansion and maximum technique, totally OP. But, and it's a big but, it requires some pretty solid aim to make the most of it, and if you're not familiar with all the moves, it can be a bit overwhelming. Not to mention, for a special grade CT, the damage is a bit underwhelming. Still, if you can get the hang of it, this technique can absolutely wreck opponents, and it's definitely a top pick for anyone who wants a diverse toolkit. So, which one of these curse techniques are you excited to try? Let me know in the comments. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.